It gives me great pleasure to introduce the co-founder, I guess, of ASAN and its director, Ari Ne'eman.
Thanks, Jim. Like you said, we do see our work as part and parcel of the cross-disability rights movement, and we know that if not for the work you did, losing cases about whether or not people with physical disabilities were more or less distracting than women in bathing suits 25 years ago, we would still have a much longer way to go. So, it's my sincere pleasure to welcome all of you to the 4th annual ASAN Gala. As always, it's wonderful. We actually have a tradition here at the ASAN Gala and at Autistic community events. We've borrowed it from the deaf community. Instead of clapping, we flap. It's actually something we do for a number of different reasons. Flapping is something that we as autistic people like to do, but it also makes the room a lot more accessible for people with sensory sensitivities. Let's try it out. Wow, a round of applause. It's wonderful to see so many familiar faces and new ones in the audience tonight. I'd like to begin by thanking our generous sponsors, particularly the Special Hope Foundation, WellPoint, the Mitsubishi Electric America Foundation, LifeShare Centene, and all of our other sponsors. Your support makes our work possible. 8 years ago, we founded ASAN to fight a reality in which autism was constantly discussed, but the voices of autistic people were always left out. We sought to create an organization that could challenge those who believed that just autism awareness was enough, even though awareness too often came without understanding, acceptance, or respect. With all of you, we've advanced an agenda about more than awareness. We've fought for our rights, our dignity, and sometimes our very lives, because our society can be aware of virtually anything, but it doesn't actually mean we understand very well. For example, not so long ago, the media picked up a heartwarming story about an autistic hiker who set off for a long trip and got lost in the Arizona desert for almost a month, and had just been found, thank God, and saved after an extensive search. The guy was actually a fairly experienced hiker, but he had bit off more than he could chew. So after 3 weeks in the desert, they found him next to the river, thank God, alive. And this was a good story, and I'm glad the guy was okay, and so on and such forth. But something caught my eye in the news coverage of this story. One of the sheriff's deputies who had found the man said it was very fortunate that he, the deputy, had attended an autism awareness training for law enforcement, because there he had learned that autistic people were drawn towards water. And without that crucial piece of knowledge, they would have had no idea to look for this guy who, let's remember, had been lost in the desert for 3 weeks by the river, the only body of water in the area. Having read this story, I have a very important question to direct to all the non-autistic people in the audience tonight. Maybe you can take a moment and educate me about their kind. What do you all look for when you're lost in the desert? Beer? Fresca? Socially appropriate activities? Eyes to make contact with? Social reciprocity, social representation. That's not even your typical voice. I hope none of you were too offended. Now, in all seriousness, we've done a lot to move the conversation beyond just awareness. And this year has been a big year for our movement. I'd like to share some highlights of what we've accomplished and what we're doing to keep moving forward. January started off with an intensive advocacy campaign to secure the inclusion of people with disabilities in the President's new 10-10 an hour executive order. Thanks to many of the people in this room, inside and outside of the administration, that effort was successful. Now, this week, ASAN joined over 20 disability rights organizations in presenting Secretary of Labor Tom Perez with new recommendations for further executive action against sub-minimum wage for people with disabilities. We are not going to let up till equal rights for all disabled workers are respected. Also in January, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services issued a new regulation that we and others in the community have been calling on them to issue for years. For the first time, we have a federal definition of what it means to be supported in the community, and just as importantly, what it means to not be. We can begin to hold states accountable, not only for getting people with disabilities out of large state-run institutions, but also out of the group homes, sheltered workshops, and gated communities that just replicate the institutional environment. Community living is about having the same rights and choices as everyone else. And over the last several months, ASAN has worked to produce and distribute a new toolkit on using this settings regulation to drive advocacy in the states. And we're working with our partners, again, many of whom are in this very room, to push out that information to advocates across the country. And this summer, after years of trying, ASAN and our true allies succeeded in burying the Combating Autism Act. The new legislation, its replacement, the Autism Cares Act, is imperfect, but a meaningful beginning towards bringing federal autism policy to a place where it works for autistic people, not against us. Earlier this month, our allies in Congress wrote to the administration and urged steps to secure real involvement of self-advocates in the implementation of this new law. And we are going to, together with the people in this room, secure real and lasting change. Now, we've come a very long way, but we still have very far to go. Most of you know that, unlike the story I told earlier, many stories about law enforcement and autistic people aren't funny at all. Like many other communities, we are frequently victims of misunderstandings with law enforcement and at times outright brutality. These issues are compounded for those members of our community who are also people of color and who face violence on that basis as well. Recent data from the Department of Education shows that children with disabilities and children of color are both disproportionately likely to face suspension, restraint, and seclusion in schools. The growing presence of school resource officers has increasingly put law enforcement in the position of responding to school discipline issues instead of educators, pushing people with disabilities, people of color, and those who fall into both categories further into the school-to-prison pipeline. These issues are connected, and as a community, we need to explore alliances to advance our shared priorities. Now, our voices are stronger together, and there are few greater proofs of that than the anniversary we celebrated just last week, the 5th anniversary of the passage of the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act, which expanded the federal hate crime statute for the first time to include disability, gender, sexual orientation, and gender identity. And that law was passed by a coalition of the whole civil rights community pushing together, and we need it to be used. Multiple times over the course of the last year, we have seen horrific incidents where autistic children were murdered by those they should have been able to trust most, their parents. And when these acts of murder occur, all too often, the media and some in the autism world seek to present not our deaths as the tragedy, but our lives. Just last week, London McCabe, a 6-year-old boy, was thrown off a bridge in Oregon by his mother. And when that story broke, the news covered it initially for the horror that it was, the horror that all infanticide is, until it came to light that London was not just any 6-year-old boy. London was autistic. And then we saw the justifications begin, the expressions of sympathy for his killer, The idea that the murder of a child could in any way be viewed as understandable. With a single revelation, London McCabe went from being a murder victim to a burden in the eyes of the media. Now, this is not an unfamiliar story. Again and again in the last several years, we have seen the press and certain voices in the autism world speak out against real prosecutions of parents and caregivers who murder autistic children. To combat this, ASAN has been working to promote robust prosecutions and meaningful sentences against relatives who murder or attempt to murder children on the basis of their disability. There are those who call such efforts extremist because we refuse to promote the idea that children with disabilities are intolerable burdens on their families, or that a parent murdering their child can be attributed to lack of service provision. If it's extremism to refuse to justify those who kill our youth, if it's extremism to speak out against our murders and demand the same justice from our legal system that would be delivered to the non-disabled, then we're glad to be called extremists. But I do not think this is so extreme. We subscribe to the shockingly ambitious proposition that disabled people are equal and should be recognized as such in our society, not as burdens, not as inspirations, not as angels or demons or empty flesh, not as symbols or objects, but as people. People who are, in the words of the founding documents of our nation, endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. Now, surely, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for disabled people, surely recognizing that, requires we put a stop to those who justify our murders. This is not who we are. Those who promote this ideology of better dead than disabled don't represent autistic people or our parents and families. They do not represent disabled people or our parents and families. We reject their actions and we reject their philosophy. And in doing so, we form a bond with each other. There's a feeling I sometimes get when meeting other disabled people and family members and allies involved in our shared struggle for equality, whether they're my elders who have been leading this struggle since before I was born, or people who are in their first years of their time in the movement. I don't know exactly how to describe it. In the immortal words of Gonzo the Great, there is not a word yet for old friends who've just met. But we're connected. We felt the same call, the same need to rip apart the world and put it back together again in a way that recognizes us as people. To be very honest with you, I relate most to those who, in a better world, probably would be doing something else. But the thought of not taking action is unthinkable. We pick up the burdens of advocacy, of community building, because we know that in the absence of our efforts, people will die and suffer and be segregated and be told that they are the ones who should be blamed for the injustices committed against them. We believe that people with disabilities have the right to be treated as equals in this world, not just in the next one. We believe in inclusion and self-determination, not just as buzzwords, but as moral imperatives. And we believe this fight is important enough to face down countless horrors every single day, because not to do so would be to abandon our obligations to each other, to our community, and to ourselves. We're building something together, these old new friends of mine, all of you. We're building a world that doesn't have to wait till after any revolution to get better. We're building a world that takes as a given that disabled people are people, always and without exception. We're not just advocates. We're explorers, seeking out a place where none of us have ever been. A place where we are respected, included as a matter of right, not charity, and are able to live a life where we never for a moment have to doubt that we have a place in this world. I've never been to that place. Few, if any, disabled people have yet. It's still so far away. But we're going to get there together. Thank you. Have a wonderful evening.